On the evening of November 12, 1996, the skies over a small village in India became the setting for aviation's deadliest mid-air collision. The place was Charkhi, Dadri, located in the state of Haryana, not too far from New Delhi's bustling Indira Gandhi International Airport. Two massive airliners, on paths that were never supposed to cross, tragically met in the twilight. One was Saudi Arabian Airlines Flight 763, a Boeing 747-100B that had just taken off from New Delhi, bound for Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. The other was Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907, an Ilyushin Il-76, on its way from Shymkent, Kazakhstan, to New Delhi for its landing. The collision was catastrophic, a brutal meeting of metal and fuel at thousands of feet in the air. The scale of the disaster was immense and difficult to comprehend. Aboard the Saudi Arabian 747 were 312 souls, passengers and crew from various nationalities, all beginning what they thought was a routine journey. On the Kazakhstani Il-76, there were 37 people, a mix of crew and passengers, nearing the end of their flight. In a horrifying instant, the lives of all 349 individuals aboard both aircraft were extinguished. There were no survivors. The impact turned the two planes into a fiery rain of wreckage, which fell over the agricultural fields below. For the villagers on the ground, it was a scene of unimaginable horror, as they became the first witnesses to the aftermath of this terrible event. The immediate aftermath was a chaotic and heartbreaking scene for the first responders and local villagers who rushed to help. They were met with a vast debris field spread across several square kilometers with fires burning across the landscape. The sheer violence of the impact had obliterated both aircraft, making the task of recovery incredibly difficult and emotionally taxing. It was clear from the beginning that this was not an accident from which anyone could have walked away. The incident immediately sent shockwaves through the global aviation community, raising urgent questions about how two modern airliners, under the guidance of air traffic control, could possibly collide in such a manner. The world watched as news reports trickled out from India, each one confirming the devastating loss of life. The Charkhi-Dadri collision remains the deadliest mid-air collision in the history of flight and the third deadliest aviation accident overall. It was a stark reminder, even in an era of increasingly safe air travel, that the sky is a vast but unforgiving space where precision and communication are paramount. The tragedy would force a painful but necessary examination of the procedures and technologies that were supposed to keep airliners safely apart, leading to changes that would redefine air safety standards for decades to come, ensuring that such a dark day would, hopefully, never be repeated. The investigation that followed the Charkhi-Dadri disaster pointed not to a single catastrophic failure, but to a chain of human and communication errors. The primary cause was attributed to the flight crew of Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907. The air traffic controller at New Delhi had instructed the Kazakhstani Ilyushin Il-76 to descend and maintain an altitude of 15,000 feet. At the same time, the departing Saudi Arabian Boeing 747 was cleared to climb and maintain 14,000 feet. This should have provided a standard vertical separation of 1,000 feet between the two aircraft as they passed each other. However, the Kazakhstani crew failed to follow this critical instruction and continued their descent past their assigned altitude. The descent below the cleared altitude of 15,000 feet placed the Il-76 directly in the path of the ascending 747. The official inquiry concluded that the Kazakhstani pilot, for reasons that remain debated, did not level off as instructed. Instead of holding at 15,000 feet, the aircraft kept descending, eventually reaching 14,000 feet. The exact altitude assigned to the Saudi Arabian jet. This pilot error was the critical link in the chain of events that led to the collision. The failure to adhere to a cleared altitude is one of the most serious errors a pilot can make, as the entire air traffic control system is built on the foundation of aircraft maintaining their assigned flight levels to ensure safe separation. A significant contributing factor was the language barrier. While the Kazakhstani flight crew was communicating with the New Delhi air traffic controller in English, it was not their native language. The investigation highlighted that the radio operator on the Il-76 was responsible for communicating with air traffic control, not the pilots flying the aircraft. This created a potential for misunderstanding or slow relay of information within the cockpit. The controller's instructions were clear, and the Kazakhstani radio operator correctly read back the instruction to maintain 15,000 feet. However, it seems this critical information was either misunderstood or not properly acted upon by the pilot flying the plane, leading to the fatal deviation from their flight path. Furthermore, the cockpit environment and crew resource management aboard the Ilyushin Il-76 may have played a role. In some older Soviet-era aircraft designs, the cockpit hierarchy was very rigid, and junior crew members might have been hesitant to challenge the actions of the captain, even if they suspected an error. While the exact cockpit dynamics can never be known, the failure to correct the descent suggests a breakdown in communication and cross-checking among the flight crew. This tragedy underscored the importance of effective crew resource management, or CRM, a concept that encourages open communication and teamwork in the cockpit to catch and correct errors before they become catastrophic. Beyond the critical pilot error, the Charkhi-Dadri collision also exposed glaring weaknesses in the aviation infrastructure in place at the time. A major contributing factor was the outdated radar system used by the New Delhi Air Traffic Control. The airport was equipped with a primary surveillance radar which could show the position of aircraft as blips on a screen, but it could not display their altitude. The controller had to rely entirely on the pilot's verbal position reports to build a mental picture of the traffic in 3 dimensions. This meant the controller had no independent way to verify if the Kazakhstan Airlines flight was actually maintaining its assigned altitude of 15,000 feet. He was effectively blind to the impending disaster. The absence of modern secondary surveillance radar, or SSR, was a critical system-level failure. SSR works by interrogating an aircraft's transponder, which then sends back a signal containing vital information, including the aircraft's unique identification code and, most importantly, its precise altitude. If the New Delhi tower had been equipped with SSR, the controller would have seen the Kazakhstani aircraft descending past its cleared altitude and could have issued an urgent warning to both flights. This technological gap meant a crucial layer of safety was missing, leaving the controller dependent solely on voice communication, which had already proven to be a weak link in the chain. Another piece of missing technology was the Traffic Collision Avoidance System, or TCAS. At the time of the accident, this life-saving equipment was not mandatory on aircraft operating in India. TCAS is an onboard system that communicates with the TCAS units on other nearby aircraft. It independently monitors the airspace around the plane, and if it detects a potential collision risk, it issues an audible warning and a resolution advisory to the pilots, instructing one aircraft to climb and the other to descend. Neither the Saudi Arabian 747 nor the Kazakhstani Il-76 was equipped with a functioning TCAS-2 system. If they had been, the system would have alerted both crews to the danger long before the collision, providing them with life-saving escape maneuvers. The airspace design around New Delhi at the time also contributed to the risk. The airport used a single corridor for both inbound and outbound traffic, meaning ascending and descending aircraft often shared the same airway, separated only by that 1,000-foot vertical buffer. This design increased the chances of conflict if an aircraft deviated from its assigned altitude. Modern airspace management often uses separate corridors for arrivals and departures to create more inherent safety. The combination of outdated radar, the lack of mandatory TCAS, and a congested airspace design created a system with very little margin for error, a system that tragically failed on that November evening. The horrifying collision over Charkhi Dadri served as a powerful and painful catalyst for change in global aviation safety. In the direct aftermath, Indian aviation authorities took swift and decisive action. One of the most immediate changes was making TCAS mandatory for all aircraft, both domestic and international, flying in Indian airspace. This single measure introduced a critical technological safety net, providing pilots with an independent system to prevent mid-air collisions, ensuring that they would no longer be solely reliant on air traffic control and their own lookout for separation. This mandate was a direct lesson learned from the fact that TCAS would almost certainly have prevented the 1996 disaster. The investigation also put a global spotlight on the issue of language proficiency in aviation. The potential for miscommunication on the Kazakhstani flight deck prompted the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, to strengthen its standards for English language proficiency. It became mandatory for all pilots and air traffic controllers operating on international routes to demonstrate a minimum level of proficiency in English, the universal language of aviation. This helps ensure that instructions are clearly understood and crew members can communicate effectively, both with air traffic control and among themselves, reducing the risk of a language-based misunderstanding leading to a catastrophic error. Furthermore, the tragedy accelerated the modernization of India's air traffic control infrastructure. The outdated primary radar system at New Delhi was quickly upgraded with modern secondary surveillance radar, giving controllers the ability to see aircraft altitudes directly on their screens. This eliminated the dangerous ambiguity of relying solely on pilot reports. The Indian government invested heavily in upgrading its entire air traffic management system across the country, implementing new technologies and procedures. This included redesigning airspace to create separate corridors for arriving and departing traffic, a fundamental change that significantly reduces the potential for head-on conflicts near busy airports. The legacy of Charkhi Dadri is a solemn but vital one. It is a story of how 349 lives were lost due to a combination of human error and systemic technological failures. However, their loss was not in vain. The sweeping reforms that followed, the mandatory adoption of TCAS, stricter English language requirements, and the modernization of air traffic control systems in India and around the world have made the skies immeasurably safer for millions of passengers every day. The collision stands as a permanent reminder in aviation history of the constant need for vigilance, clear communication, and technological redundancy to ensure that such a dark day in aviation never happens again.
So hit that subscribe and ring that bell too, for history's wonders waiting for you. Billy at Works, let the knowledge ignite, exploring the past with all of our